Welcome to another discussion of William Blake's poetry. We are focusing on Songs of Innocence and Experience, showing the two contrary states of the human soul. The poem we're going to be discussing is from Songs of Innocence, and it's called the Cradle Song. There's also a Cradle Song in the Songs of Experience. And we'll touch on that a little bit, but that's not going to be the focus. I want to focus on one poem at a time through the as we go through this. Part of what I want to help you see is the beauty of what Blake has created, not only in the individual poems, which are very valuable and wonderful and worthy of contemplation on their own, but also in the totality of the work, the combination of the Songs of Innocence and Experience. And this is a great example of that because it's one of the more simple poems. It's one of the more simple ones. It's a lullaby. So what we're going to be talking about today is the lullaby form, Blake's poetry as lifelong education. We're going to do a reading of the poem. We'll do a little bit of what I call converse with verse, where we just go through it and kind of talk about what's going on. But it's so simple, there's really not that much, but there is some hidden indication as to what's going on here. And that of a broader perspective, a broader worldview that you can agree or disagree with. But that's what we're going to be discussing. And I actually have a little bit of a special surprise for you in this one, which is we're going to listen to a couple of snippets of songs that, and these are orchestras, choirs, that have put this to music in modern times. And I'll just point out that I think, as far as I can see, of the English poets, at least of the Romantics, but of the English poets in general, I'm pretty confident that Blake is one of the most put to music, it's called the Songs of Innocence and Experience, and it's put to music quite often. So the first thing we're going to do, as always, is just read the poem. So poetry is meant to be read aloud. It is not meant to be read on a blank page. So I really encourage you to read it out loud for yourself, to experience it, you can listen to my reading of it. And then I would look at the actual plate that Blake created. So he created a plate, which he hand painted, or hand colored, I should say. And he created this whole process of printing based on these plates that he developed in the 18th century. And they're quite beautiful and they're simplistic. But when you bought this at the time, this is how he expected you to experience the poetry. So if you're not doing that, I think you're missing something important. Okay, so here's the poetry reading. And then, like I said, we'll converse with verse and go through some other topics, including listening to music. A Cradle Song by William Blake. Sweet dreams form a shade o'er my lovely infant's head, sweet dreams of pleasant streams by happy, silent, moony beams. Sweet sleep with soft down, weave thy brows an infant crown. Sweet sleep, angel mild, hover o'er my happy child. Sweet smiles in the night, hover over my delight. Sweet smiles, mother's smiles, all the livelong night beguiles. Sweet moans, dove-like sighs, chase not slumber from thy eyes. Sweet moans, sweeter smiles, all the dove-like moans beguiles. Sleep, sleep, happy child, all creation slept and smiled. Sleep, sleep, happy sleep, while o'er thee thy mother weep. Sweet babe, in thy face holy image I can trace. Sweet babe, once like thee, thy Maker lay and wept for me. Wept for me, wept for thee, for all, when he was an infant small. Thou his image ever see, heavenly face that smiles on thee. Smiles on thee, on me, on all, who became an infant small. Infant smiles are his own smiles. Heaven and earth to peace beguiles. So to understand a little bit more of William Blake's purpose here, we need to think about, one, what a lullaby is. That's what this is supposed to be. This is supposed to be a lullaby. And if you listen to it and, listen to it by someone else, read it yourself, there's a kind of sing-song way that it goes, that it comes across. Sweet dreams form a shade. There's a lot of sweet, there's a lot of sleep, and it sounds pleasant. Streams, moony beams. I mean, there's a lot of rhyme, a lot of simple, words. And by the way, you might have noticed there's one complex word here that's thrown in there, which I think is really interesting and we'll talk about. Do you know what that word is? Now, a lullaby is traditionally a gentle song intended to calm children and lull them to sleep. It's often repetitive, soothing, simple. That's it. It's something you can, memorize easily and read to your infant. William Blake was fascinated by the idea of innocence. And remember, the title of this book is The Songs of Innocence and of Experience, showing the two contrary states of the human soul. So he thinks of them as states of the human soul. He does not think of them as, you have innocence when you're young and then you have experience when you're older. He thinks of them as an intermingling that is there from the very beginning. So there is elements of experience right here at the very beginning. And that's one of the things I want to point out. And when you read the whole thing together, the whole book, you get a lot more of this and it becomes more clear that that's the case. Before we do listening to a couple of songs or choir music that this was put to, I want to do a little bit of what I call a converse with verse, which is what I recommend everybody do, which is just where you read through it and just think through some of the meanings and what's going on. And even if it's really simple, that's fine too. So we're going to do this stanza by stanza just to give a little bit of an idea of what is perhaps happening here. Even though, obviously, let me just point this out, an infant, who is who you would read this for, isn't going to understand it. But here's something really interesting about this process of communicating to an infant. We know that the infant doesn't really understand the words yet, but we do know that meaning will eventually come to that infant. And part of how meaning will come to the infant is by the hearing of many words, many thoughts over time. As time progresses, the infant has, seen and heard things and will eventually emulate and then come up to meaning. And that's how we come up with language. We, as the sayers and the tellers of these songs, will also learn something. We'll also get something, whether we realize it or not. And, they say that, when you have a child, it's a transformative event. And of course it is. And part of the transformation is not merely the watching passively of an infant. It's also your interaction and how you're, reliving things that you were maybe heard when you were an infant yourself start to kind of resonate with you in different ways. And I think Blake really plays with that throughout all of these poems. So let's go through this a little bit. So sweet dreams form a shade o'er my lovely infant's head, sweet dreams of pleasant streams by happy silent moony beams. By the way, the sentence doesn't seem to end there, but it depends on what version you're looking at. Blake always played with grammar. And so in one version I do have, he ends it there, but in the plate, if you look at the plate, you'll notice that he actually doesn't end the sentence by happy silent moony beams, sweet sleep with soft down is where it actually ends. So the sentence could go sweet dreams of pleasant streams by happy silent moony beams, sweet sleep with soft down. Is there anything to that? Probably not, but there might be. I don't know. It's a little difficult with Blake, I think, in grammar. But this first stanza is definitely something we could take as a whole. And again, it's a simple, sweet song, but we get that there is dreams forming a shade. So protecting this child, and there's dreams. Whose dreams? The child's dreams, the dream of the mother. We'll kind of figure that out as we go. Sweet dreams of pleasant streams by happy silent moony beams. That's kind of like what we might want our child to dream of, is just pleasant streams, moony beams, just nature things, right? So he's a romantic poet of the 18th century and early 19th. That is a big theme with them. Sweet sleep with soft down, weave thy brows an infant crown. So crowning this child. There's something about the kingdom of what? We don't know. Sweet sleep, angel mild, the kingdom of heaven. Maybe he's making some references here. Hover o'er my happy child. So again, it sounds like very much a mother having pleasant, wishful dreams for this child. Sweet smiles in the night, hover over my delight. Sweet smiles, mother's smiles, all the livelong night beguiles. Now that's an interesting one, I think. And this is representative of what Blake is doing and thinking throughout all of his work. Sweet smiles in the night hover over my delight. There's something pleasant in hovering over your delight, which is obviously the infant. Sweet smiles, mother smiles. So now is a reference to the mother. All the livelong night beguiles. Now look up the definition of beguiles. I mean, you probably know what it means. It's generally charm or enchant someone, sometimes in a deceptive way. Now a literary definition I'm getting is to help time pass pleasantly, to beguile some of the time they went to the movie theater, they went to the theater. So maybe that's what he means here, is to help time pass pleasantly. That could be a good one. I do think the connotations of deception are in the word beguiles. Now I'd want to look at just as how I think about this poetry is you also have to look at the meaning of it in the 18th century. So 1789, when this was originally written, does beguiles mean more of what I think it means, which is more the deception, or is it more of this literary sense of passing time? I mean, it's probably more the literary is my sense now that I'm thinking about it. But knowing Blake, I think there might be a touch of this deceptiveness. And that's part of me just having read a lot of Blake. And that's part of why I think you should read one poet over time, is because you'll get a sense of him in that way that you won't get just reading the words. Okay, so let's continue. So, all the livelong night beguiles. So passing away the time, perhaps, is what that means, with mother smiles. And maybe there's a little deception there. Maybe there's a little bit of charming in a deceptive way. Sweet moans, dove-like sighs, chase not slumber from your eyes, thy eyes. Sweet moans, sweeter smiles, all the dove-like moans beguiles. All right, so we have that word beguiles again. So sweet moans, sweeter smiles, all the dove-like moans beguiles. So that one again makes me think of more the charming deceptively a little bit more. So sweet moans, dove-like sighs, chase not slumber from thy eyes. So what is he saying here? Sweet moans, dove-like sighs. So sighing like a dove. So that's peace and innocence is how that's usually represented. Chase not slumber from thy eyes. So they don't chase. So the mother hopes that does not scare away the sleep from the child. Sweet moans, sweeter smiles, all the dove-like moans beguiles. So to me, that's really interesting. If you watch some of the other videos that I do, you might notice that even, again, in Blake's view, he doesn't extract experience from life at any moment in time. So in his view, I think experience is always part of you. And so I want you to think about what sweet moans, sweeter smiles, all the dove-like moans beguiles might mean in a certain sense. Again, thinking about a mother and motherhood and that not only being a mother, but being a woman. Sleep, sleep, happy child, all creation slept and smiled. Sleep, sleep, happy sleep, while o'er thee thy mother weep. Now that's very Blakean. We have this pleasant lullaby. Sleep, sleep, happy child, all creation slept and smiled. Everything's pleasant. Sleep, sleep, happy sleep, everything's good. But over you, your mother is weeping. Why is she weeping? Sweet babe, in thy face, holy image I can trace. Sweet babe, once like thee, thy maker lay and wept for me. Here we're getting a very Christian iconography here. So we're seeing, I think, Christ, God, and I would even think of, what this poem is really making me think of is the Pieta, the mother of Jesus, weeps over her son, Jesus, who has died. And the kind of, even if you're not a religious person, the sorrow, the loss, the sadness of all of that. And kind of one of the meanings of this for motherhood, I think, as, non-mother myself, but what I see in this externally is the sense in which every mother and parent has to recognize, because of all the information, the knowledge, the experience, the living that the parent has done, recognizes that the child and the infant, as innocent as it is in a world that is full of bad things, things that could harm it, things that could kill it, things that could make it sad, tragic events like an early death and a sacrifice in this sense. So I see a lot of that when I see, for instance, the while o'er thee thy mother weep. It's a bittersweet type of thing. It's a lovely infant, but then the recognition of bad things that are in the world and can happen. And then there's this iconographic connection to the holy image I can trace. So in the infant, the author, the mother, is tracing this son. I think thy maker, so the God who again came down to earth in the form of a son. Don't get into dogmatism of Christianity too much, but no offense to Christians, but I think something like that's going on. Wept for me, wept for thee, for all, when he was an infant small. So now we're getting clearly this, which we've seen in other poems in this work, reference to Jesus who comes to earth, I think. Thou his image ever see. So you his image ever see, heavenly face that smiles on thee. I think one viewpoint of Blake is this idea that before we're born, our soul is kind of manufactured in heaven. And I see a little bit of that viewpoint, that religious viewpoint here. That, it's like you had just seen your maker's face and now you're here. And so there's that connection between the heavenly and the infant. And this was a very romantic view. Rousseau had this, and there's great works like Emile and on education that was very influential and still is very influential in our sense of childhood and infants and childhood as being basically, it's like almost like you just came out of the manufacturing floor of heaven. So you're closest to heaven in a sense, because you were just there. The farther we get away from it, the farther we are from heaven, because we're corrupted by earth. And that's a very religious viewpoint, a Christian in particular, but many of the Abrahamic religions, or all of them, have that view. Okay, so seems like one sentence. Heavenly face that smiles on thee, on me, on all, who became an infant small. So again, this is a reference to Jesus becoming an infant. Infant smiles are his own smiles. Heaven and earth to peace beguiles. So that's an interesting way to end the poem. Heaven and earth to peace beguiles. So is it passing time? Is heaven and earth, through infant smiles, is that how we pass time? Or is there a charm from heaven that is actually letting us deal with all the problems? It's beguiling us, charming us into heaven and earth and or perhaps just earth that is confusing us and making us accept our lot on earth. But, we get pleasant moments with our little infants. That's beautiful. So I think there's subtle little things here that are really important to kind of tease out. As I mentioned at the beginning, Blake is the English poet most set to music. And I think you can hear why. I mean, it's very musical, a lot of vowels, so you can really sleep and sing that if you're into singing. If you're into composing music, this is a good lyric and a good example of how to create great lyrics that are well sung. And we'll hear a little bit of that. I'll just warn you now, I'm not able to, because of copyright, play the whole thing, but I'll send you links. If you look in the content below, you can see the full links to the video and you can go watch the whole song or listen to the whole song if you'd like. But Blake wrote with a musical ear, often envisioning poetry as something heard, not just read. That's something that I say all the time. I think that's true. It's not just about meaning. It's also about sound. And I think Blake really leaned into the sound part. There's also a reason why this is very religious in nature and why we have a lot of this focus on religion. I think religions in particular get this way better than anybody else, which is if you want to, I'm just going to say the word, if you want to indoctrinate or educate, you could say it this way, or if you want to get someone to feel or experience something, music is a good way to do that, or a musically way of doing it. So if you've ever been to church, there's a lot of chanting in unison. That's very common. It's ubiquitous across almost all religions. You chant all kinds of things. You'll have the pastor, the priest saying certain things, and then you chanting them. And even in a Catholic setting where there's not always as much chanting, where sometimes it's more on the stage, a performance and a production where the priest and the choir, they're doing a little bit more of it. It's still done in a very musical way where you listen and take it in. And that is how we learn and experience things. And that trains our consciousness into a certain worldview. And that's why religions often do this, because that's what you want to do. You want people to have a certain worldview. This is, by the way, for those of you who are philosophically and atheistically inclined, this is why you will always fail, because you don't get this part right. Humans need language and the connection of language. All right, so now I'm going to play a few seconds. Again, unfortunately, I can't play too much because of copyright, but I'll play a few seconds of a song or a choir by David Hurd, who put this together with music and, using the lyrics from Blake. I think pretty spot on music. So I don't know if he changed anything. Notice the rich, lush harmonies and the communal feeling. So this is not just a mother reading these words to a young infant. This is actually, you get a feeling of a deeper emotional resonances. Okay, sorry, I have to do that, but you can listen to the whole song on your own. I also if you're teaching this or sharing this with a child, this is if you're a parent, this is the kind of thing that you can definitely just play in your house, and you can then give your, read the poem aloud and kind of give your students, if they're young, or your young infants yourself, you can expose them to this kind of thing that then you can later in their life pull out the lyrics. I'll play a little bit more just in case. We'll see if I need to edit it out, I can. So you could definitely tell very much in a religious setting, right? So go ahead and check that out on your own. Listen to it. I think it's pleasant to listen to. It's great to have around if you have an infant, play it in the infant's room. My argument for this poem and this book of poetry is that it's really a book of poetry that is the greatest book of poetry ever written for the introduction to poetry to young children. And it can really help you in exposing a young kid to this, and then over time extracting more and more meaning out of it, which will then, I think, kind of entice people to want to read more poetry. So in the David Hurd that we just listened to, I hope there's a richness to it. I think there's lush textures. There's a sense of warmth and protective embrace, very much communal and comforting. Now, the next one we're going to listen to is Douglas Bruce Johnson's. I think this is like 2023. This was done in an actual church for like a communal event that they do starting on December 10th, I believe. I think there's a little bit more, even though there's a choir and there's still a lot to it, to me it sounds a little bit more simple. There's more direct. The violin gently floats above the choir, creating intimacy and a sense of private tenderness. Okay, so we'll listen to a few seconds of this. Again, I'll put links so you can listen to the whole thing. Infant's head. Okay, so like I said, I could only play a little bit of that, but hopefully I don't get hit with copyright because I try to have it. But if you're teaching this in class, you can teach this to fifth graders, your first graders, anything, and you can play the music. They don't need to understand everything, and that's okay. That's okay. Part of what I think is valuable about this, as I said, is the teasing out over time of the deeper meaning, so that you can see as a young child, as you grow up, that poetry really is about rereading and seeing things that you couldn't have seen before. And you've all had this experience with, a novel, for instance, that you love, and where you read it as a teenager, and then you read it again 10 years later, and it was a completely different novel, a completely different experience. And the thing that is great about poetry and these kind of shorter lyrical poems is that it's the same thing, but you get it in such a truncated period, sense. You get it a lot, more compact. And that's one of the great values of it. So I just wanted to give you a couple of ideas of, if you're a teacher or a parent, how you can teach or bring this up with your children, your students. So one, with infants, toddlers, again, just simply singing or reading it aloud at bedtime regularly. Have this, play the music that I just played in the background. Both of them. Don't just do one. Let them read the words. Part of what I really, again, also believe is just the importance of surrounding your child and students with words so they can get a sense of the words over time, over and over again. Now, early readers, let the children sound out and recite simple stanzas. Read it, let them read it with you. So as a reading exercise, read through this book and through this poem. In upper elementary, you can, again, listen to the music, and you can even ask a kid to maybe illustrate the scene, identify rhymes, repeated sounds, something simple like that. Middle school, really high school, you could start actually, and again, high school, just read the whole thing and dig into the deeper things, particularly the philosophy of innocence versus experience that Blake has versus other thinkers. You could start pulling in other thinkers and the deeper meanings of what it would mean. What is innocence? What is experience? For Blake, we're starting to see that innocence has experience in it, and experience has innocence in it. So both of them it's a state. And part of it is what you get out of Blake's view when we read through all the poems is we get a sense of the clash between them, the thesis and antithesis that bring in new meaning. And that's his view of your soul, is that it's a constant intermixture of the two. Now, he was not the only one who thought this. There are philosophers like Hegel and others. Hegel, I think, actually comes after William Blake. But this kind of idea is starting to become, to percolate in the world, and it's a more and more prominent view. And I think it's best demonstrated in simple works like William Blake's. So William Blake shows us poetry isn't something that needs years of preparation to enjoy. That's what I'm trying to accomplish with this book, is that the reason we don't appreciate poetry anymore is because it's taught completely wrong. It's taught with all kinds of dates and times, and that's nice, but it's not important. What's important is the meaning, the joy, the pleasantry of the music, the songs, and the actual poems that you're getting. And in order to get that into your child, you have to, spend time with them just enmeshed in the words and the beauty of the words, and some of the meaning that comes along with it. Okay, so this has been another poem from Songs of Innocence and Experience. I hope you will go listen to and watch some of the other ones as well. There's more to come, and find me on troubadour.studio, where I will do more of this and more courses for you.